The emergency klaxons scream through the eternal vigilance like the death rattle of something ancient and furious. Brother Sergeant Castile of the Blood Angels presses his gauntlet hand against the viewport, feeling the vibration of the ship's hull through ceramite and plasteel, and stares at the thing that has emerged from the warp like a tumor breaking through healthy flesh. It's massive. Impossibly, horrifically massive. The space hulk drifts through the void ahead, a conglomeration of ships, stations, asteroids, and God Emperor knows what else, all fused together across millennia of warp exposure into a single nightmarish structure. He can see Gothic cruisers from the Horus Heresy melded with Xenos vessels he doesn't recognize, their hulls twisted together like lovers frozen in an eternal, agonized embrace. Entire city blocks of what might once have been Imperial architecture jut from the mass at impossible angles, their windows dark except for the occasional flicker of light that could be electrical discharge, phosphorescent fungi, or something worse. Something that moves with purpose. Contact confirmed. Chapter Master Dante's voice crackles through the Vox, carrying 10,000 years of weary authority. The sin of damnation has returned. Castile feels his blood run cold despite the thermal regulators in his power armor. Every space marine in the Imperium knows that name. The sin of damnation isn't just any space hulk. It's the space hulk, a legendary drifting graveyard that appears and disappears from real space with terrifying regularity, each time bringing fresh horrors. The Blood Angels have boarded it before. Not all of them came back. None of them came back unchanged. All units, prepare for boarding operations. Dante continues, and Castile can hear the resignation beneath the command. They both know what's waiting inside that twisted metal corpse. The sin of damnation has appeared in the Cryptus system. If it reaches the forge world of Lysios, 20 billion souls will be at risk. We board in 4 hours. May the Emperor protect us all. Castile turns from the viewport and begins the long walk to the armory. Around him, his battle brothers are already preparing, their movements carrying the practiced efficiency of warriors who've done this 100 times before. But he can see the tension in their postures, the way their hands linger on weapons, the frequency with which they glance at the chronometers embedded in their vambraces. For hours to prepare for an environment that defies every tactical doctrine, every strategic principle, every assumption about warfare that the Codex Astartes was built upon. For hours to prepare for hell, because that's what a space hulk really is. Not just a navigational hazard, not just a drifting collection of debris. A space hulk is a violation of reality itself, a place where the laws of physics become suggestions, where time flows differently in adjacent corridors, where the geometry of passages can change while you're walking through them. It's a place where genostealers breed in numbers that would overwhelm a hive city, where chaos corruption seeps through bulkheads like toxic gas, where ancient defense systems reactivate after millennia of dormancy and can't distinguish between intruders and the crew they were built to protect. And space marines have to go inside them anyway. They have to because space hulks represent both catastrophic threat and invaluable opportunity. A single hulk might contain archaeotech from the dark age of technology worth more than entire star systems, STC fragments that could revolutionize Imperial manufacturing, gene seed from lost chapters, or simply strategic intelligence about Xenos movements. But more pressingly, if left unchecked, a space hulk can drift into populated systems, crash into inhabited worlds, or disgorge thousands of genostealers onto unsuspecting planets. Someone has to clear them. Someone has to go into the dark. That someone is always the Adeptus Astartes. Castile reaches the armory and begins the ritual of preparation, each action honed by decades of repetition. This isn't like preparing for conventional warfare. This is specialized. This is surgical. This requires equipment and mindset that most Imperial Guard regiments couldn't even conceptualize. This requires understanding how Space Marines really survive a Space Hulk. The first rule of Space Hulk warfare is simple. You don't survive through courage alone. You survive through preparation so meticulous, so obsessive, so exhaustive that it borders on paranoia. And even then, you might not survive at all. Brother Techmarine Hadrian stands before a tactical display in the Eternal Vigilance's Strategium, his augmetic eye whirring as it processes data streams that would overwhelm an unaugmented human brain. Around him, Servo-skulls project hololithic images of the sin of damnation, each one compiled from previous boarding actions, astropathic surveys, and long-range auger scans. The images don't match. The Hulk's configuration has changed since our last encounter. Hadrian announces to the assembled squad leaders, his voice carrying the flat precision of someone who's replaced half his organic brain with cogitators. Sections that were accessible in M41.894 are now sealed, or have been replaced by structures that weren't present in previous scans. The probability of encountering identical geometry to historical records is less than 12%. This is the nightmare of Space Hulk operations. You can study all the intelligence you want, review every previous boarding action, memorize every deck plan from every ship that might be part of the conglomeration, and it won't matter. Space Hulks change. They shift. Components that were welded together by warp exposure can separate. New wrecks can be absorbed during their time in the Imperium. Entire sections can be rearranged like a puzzle box manipulated by malevolent gods. Which means every boarding action is essentially a blind insertion into unknown territory against unknown threats. But that doesn't mean you go in ignorant. We've identified 3 primary objectives. Hadrian continues, manipulating the hololithic display. 3 sections of the Hulk pulse with red light. Primary. Locate and destroy the Genestealer Broodlord. Intelligence suggests the infestation is centered in what was once the cathedral district of an Imperial transport vessel, the Sword of Baal. Secondary. Secure the Engineerium sections and plant melta-charges to destabilize the Hulk's trajectory. Tertiary. Recover any intact gene seed from the Angel's sanguine terminators lost during the previous incursion. Castiel studies the display, his enhanced memory already cataloging approach vectors, potential ambush points, areas where Genestealer hybrids might establish nests. But he's also noting something else, the gaps. The massive sections of the Hulk where their scans return nothing but static, where the warp's influence is so strong that even the most sophisticated Auspex equipment can't penetrate. Those gaps terrify him more than the known threats. What about atmospheric composition? Asks Brother Raphael, a veteran of 3 previous Hulk clearances. His armor still bears scorch marks from the last one. A reminder of the time his squad breached a sealed chamber only to find it filled with superheated promethium vapors that ignited the moment oxygen was introduced. Variable and unpredictable, Hadrian replies, pulling up environmental data. We're detecting breathable atmosphere in approximately 40% of the Hulk. The remaining sections show vacuum, toxic gas compositions, or anomalous readings that don't correspond to any known atmospheric mixture. Several sections are registering atmospheric pressure fluctuations that suggest active life support systems, which means power sources are still functioning after thousands of years in the warp. This is another brutal reality of Space Hulk warfare. One corridor might have perfectly breathable air maintained by systems that haven't failed in 10,000 years. The next might be filled with chlorine gas leaked from a ruptured Xenos vessel. The one after that might be hard vacuum because something punched a hole through the hull centuries ago. And the transitions between them might not be sealed by airlocks or pressure doors. They might just be arbitrary boundaries where reality decides to change its rules. Space Marines can survive in vacuum for limited periods. Their multi-lung augmentation allows them to hyperventilate and store oxygen, creating a reserve that can sustain them for up to 15 minutes. Their SUS and membrane can put them into a form of suspended animation that dramatically reduces oxygen consumption. And their power armor, when fully sealed, can provide life support even when compromised, recycling what little air remains in the suit and scrubbing carbon dioxide through sophisticated filtration systems. But limited is the operative word. No Space Marine can function indefinitely in hard vacuum, and the constant environmental changes drain power armor reserves, stress biological systems, and create tactical vulnerabilities that enemies can exploit. You can't fire a flamer in vacuum. No oxygen means no combustion. Bolter rounds still work, but their detonation profiles change without atmospheric resistance. And if your armor's environmental seal is compromised while you're in a toxic atmosphere, you have seconds to find clean air before your enhanced physiology is overwhelmed. You have to know what you're walking into. You have to prepare for every possibility. which is why the armory of the Eternal Vigilance looks less like a weapons depot and more like a specialized research facility. Brother Hadrian walks Castiel's squad through the equipment selection with the thoroughness of a medici explaining a complex surgery. This isn't just grab a bolter and go. This is understanding that every single piece of equipment represents a life or death decision, and that the wrong choice made here in the safety of the ship will kill you hours later in the darkness of the Hulk. Standard bolter configuration is inadequate for space Hulk operations. Hadrian begins, his mechadendrites assembling a modified bolter on the workbench with precision that would make a master artificer weep. Mass-reactive rounds are optimized for armored targets in open terrain. In the confined spaces of a Hulk, ricochets become lethal to your own squad, and overpenetration can breach critical bulkheads, causing catastrophic decompression or, worse, breaching containment on sections that have been sealed for good reason. He holds up a magazine loaded with specialized rounds, each one marked with high Gothic script and purity seals. We're issuing Kraken pattern penetrators for armored threats, specifically Genestealer Patriarchs and any Chaos Marines we might encounter. But your primary load will be Vengeance rounds. Castiel knows Vengeance rounds well. They're designed to detonate on impact rather than after penetration, transferring maximum kinetic energy to the target without risking overpenetration. Against Genestealers, with their reinforced chitinous exoskeletons and terrifying speed, Vengeance rounds are ideal. They deliver massive trauma without the risk of the round continuing through your target and into the battle brother standing behind it. In the tight confines of a space Hulk, where firing lanes are measured in meters rather than hundreds of meters, where your squadmates are always in close proximity, controlled ballistics aren't just preferable, they're mandatory. What about armor-piercing loads? Asks Brother Dante. Not the chapter master, but a younger Marine who shares the legendary name. He's on his first space Hulk deployment, and Castiel can see the nervous energy in the way he checks and rechecks his weapon. Limited issuance, Hadrian replies. Hellfire rounds for priority targets only. Each Marine will carry one magazine of Hellfire in addition to standard loads. But understand this, Brother Dante, Hellfire rounds contain mutagenic acid compounds designed to destroy organic tissue at the molecular level. If you fire them in an enclosed space with compromised ventilation, you'll be breathing vaporized acid. Your lineman's ear can protect you from the worst effects, but your squad's effectiveness will be compromised. The young Marine nods, filing away the information. Castiel remembers his own first Hulk deployment, how overwhelming the sheer volume of tactical considerations had seemed. Standard combat was almost simple by comparison. Identify enemy, achieve fire superiority, advance or hold as tactical situation dictates. Space Hulk warfare required you to think three-dimensionally, to anticipate environmental hazards as dangerous as any enemy, to understand that the space itself was hostile to your survival. Flommers? Asks Brother Matthias, the squad's assault specialist and a pyromaniac by temperament if not by doctrine. Essential, Hadrian confirms, and Castiel sees Matthias relax slightly. Genestealers prefer enclosed spaces, ventilation shafts, and clustered approaches, where their numbers can overwhelm even Space Marine combat effectiveness. Promethium denies them their environmental advantage. A single sustained burst in a confined corridor can create a wall of fire that even Genestealers won't cross. But, and here Hadrian's augmetic eye focuses on Matthias with uncomfortable intensity. Watch your fuel consumption. Average engagement duration on previous Sin of Damnation incursions was 6.3 hours. Standard flamer tanks provide 4 hours of sustained operation at optimal efficiency. You will run dry before you reach extraction if you're not disciplined. 6.3 hours. Castiel files that away. 6 hours of continuous combat in an environment that's actively hostile, against enemies that don't retreat, don't surrender, don't negotiate, and don't tire. 6 hours where every decision might be your last, where every corner might hide death, where every sound might be the warning before claws tear through armor that was supposed to be proof against anything the galaxy could throw at you. The equipment selection continues, each item another piece of the puzzle that might mean survival. Auspex scanners modified to filter warp interference, though their effective range will be reduced from 500 meters to less than 50. Motion trackers calibrated for the acoustic signatures of genestealer movement, though they'll also pick up every piece of debris shifting in the Hulk's unstable structure, creating a constant background of false positives that you have to learn to filter through experience or die from inattention. Melta charges for breaching sealed bulkheads, though using them risks alerting every hostile within audible range, which in a space hulk could be kilometers, sound traveling through metal corridors with perfect fidelity, echoing and re-echoing until you can't tell if that scream you heard was from the next room or 3 decks away. Photon flash grenades for disorienting genostealers, though their effectiveness diminishes in zero-gravity environments where enemies can approach from any vector and don't rely on ground-based movement. Croc grenades for hard targets, though throwing them in confined spaces requires precision that even Space Marine reflexes struggle to achieve. Too short and it detonates in your face, too far and it might breach a bulkhead you need intact. And then there's the question of melee weapons. Brother Sergeant. Hadrian addresses Castile directly. Your combat knife has been serviced and sanctified. However, given the close-quarters nature of Space Hulk engagements, you may wish to requisition a power weapon. Castile considers. Power weapons, swords, axes, or mauls sheathed in disruptive energy fields are devastating in close combat. They can cut through Genostealer chitin, Chaos Marine armor, even bulkhead doors when necessary. But they're also power-intensive, draining the same energy cells that keep your armor functional, your life support active, your Vox communications online. In a 6-hour mission, that drain adds up. I'll keep the combat knife, Castile decides. But issue power swords to the assault squad. They'll be our vanguard in close quarters. Hadrian nods approvingly. This is the calculus of Space Hulk warfare, balancing offensive capability against resource management, understanding that the most powerful weapon is useless if your armor fails before you reach extraction. And then there's the armor itself. Tactical dreadnought armor is authorized for squad leaders and specialists, Hadrian announces, and Castile feels his pulse quicken despite decades of conditioning. Terminator armor. The most advanced personal protection the Imperium can manufacture. Each suit a relic maintained across millennia, crafted from materials that can no longer be replicated, proof against weapons that would shred standard power armor like paper. Each Terminator suit is a walking tank, equipped with storm bolters that can lay down devastating suppressive fire, power fists that can tear through reinforced bulkheads, and armor plating thick enough to shrug off plasma fire and Melta blasts. A Space Marine in Terminator armor is essentially invincible to conventional small arms, resistant even to heavy weapons, and psychologically intimidating to an extent that can break enemy morale before combat even begins. But it's also slow, ponderous. The suits weigh nearly as much as a light vehicle, and while they incorporate suspensor fields and pneumatic assists that allow the wearer to move, that movement is deliberate, measured, unstoppable but not fast. In the tight confines of a Space Hulk, that extra protection comes with reduced mobility, slower reaction times, and increased risk of becoming trapped in collapsed passages. Space Marines in Terminator armor are nearly unstoppable in direct combat, advancing through enemy fire that would annihilate lesser warriors, crushing opposition through sheer implacable force. But they're also committed to their path. You can't quickly reverse course when wearing half a ton of ceramite and adamantium. You can't squeeze through gaps in wreckage or navigate ventilation shafts. You can't execute the rapid repositioning that often means the difference between survival and death when Genostealer swarms are coming from multiple directions. It's a calculated risk. More protection versus less flexibility. Overwhelming firepower versus tactical mobility. Castile studies the Terminator suits racked in their maintenance cradles, each one bearing the honors and battle scars of centuries. He's qualified to wear them. Every sergeant in the Blood Angels has completed the training, has proven themselves capable of bearing the weight physically and psychologically. But qualification doesn't mean it's the right choice for this mission. I'll take standard Mark 7 power armor, Castile decides, and he sees Brother Hadrian's slight nod of approval. Fast response capability will be more valuable than additional protection. If we encounter something that can breach Terminator plate, we're probably dead anyway. A sound tactical assessment, Hadrian agrees. However, I'm assigning Terminator armor to Brother Raphael and his heavy weapons team. They'll be establishing fire positions at choke points while your squad conducts reconnaissance in force. The mobility trade-off is acceptable when you're holding ground rather than advancing through unknown territory. The equipment selection complete, Castile's squad begins the meticulous process of loading out. This isn't rushed. Every magazine is checked. Every power cell is verified at full charge. Every seal on every piece of armor is tested, retested, and blessed by the tech marines who've maintained this equipment across decades of service. Because in a space Hulk, equipment failure isn't an inconvenience. It's a death sentence. Brother Matthias tests his flamer, sending a brief burst of promethium across the armory's testing range. The fire burns clean and hot, exactly as it should. He nods satisfaction, then begins the ritual of checking fuel levels, ignition systems, pressure regulators, every component that stands between him and the moment when he pulls the trigger and nothing happens. Brother Dante, young, nervous, determined to prove himself, practices magazine changes with his bolter, executing the motion again and again until it's fluid, automatic, something he can do in pitch darkness with Genestealers screaming toward him from every direction. Castile watches approvingly. The young Marine understands something crucial. In the chaos of Space Hulk combat, you don't rise to the occasion. You fall to your level of training. But equipment is only half the preparation. The other half is mental, psychological, spiritual. And that preparation happens in the reclusium, where Chaplain Morier waits in his black armor, his skull-faced helmet already sealed, his Crozius Arcanum crackling with barely contained power that makes the air taste of ozone and righteousness. The reclusium is a sacred space, its walls decorated with the names of every blood angel who has fallen in service across 10,000 years. There are so many names that they've been inscribed in text so small it requires Space Marine enhanced vision to read. Castile knows some of those names personally. Brothers who fought beside him, bled beside him, died beside him in the darkness of places like the sin of damnation. Their gene seed was recovered when possible, implanted in new recruits, continuing the genetic legacy that stretches back to Sanguinius himself. But their memories, their experiences, their individual selves, those were lost. Space Marines don't truly die as long as their gene seed survives. But they don't truly live on either. They become genetic data, biological inheritance, memories preserved in second-hand accounts and after-action reports. Brothers, Chaplain Morier's voice booms through the chapel, echoing off walls that have heard the speech or variations of it countless times before. We board the sin of damnation not in search of glory, but in service to the Imperium and the Emperor's will. What we will face inside that tomb is not merely physical danger, but spiritual corruption. The warp has touched every surface. Chaos has left its taint in every shadow. You will see things that logic says cannot exist. You will hear voices that speak with the tongues of lost brothers. You will feel the black rage stirring, calling you to surrender to the fury that dwells in our gene seed. The black rage, the genetic curse that haunts every blood angel, the psychic echo of Sanguinius's death that can overwhelm even the most disciplined battle brother and transform them into a berserker capable only of violence. It's the price the sons of Sanguinius pay for their perfection, for the genetic gifts that make them among the finest warriors in the Imperium. Beauty and artistry, rage and bloodlust, nobility and savagery, all inherited from their primarch, all burning in their veins. In normal combat, the black rage is dangerous but manageable. Battle brothers who feel its onset can be recognized by their squadmates, supported through the crisis, or if necessary, separated from the main force before they become a liability. Chaplains like Morier are trained to recognize the signs, to speak the words and perform the rites that can pull a brother back from the edge. But in the confines of a space Hulk, where stress is maximal and support is minimal, where every shadow might hide enemies and every sound might be threat, where the warp's influence amplifies emotions and psychological vulnerabilities, in that environment, the black rage can be catastrophic. A space marine who falls to the black rage in the middle of a tactical operation becomes a liability to his entire squad. He'll charge forward without regard for formations or fire lanes, attacking with suicidal fury that leaves his brothers exposed. He'll empty his ammunition without fire discipline, leaving himself defenseless when his magazines run dry. He might even attack his own squadmates if the hallucinations are severe enough, if the visions of ancient betrayals are vivid enough to override recognition of present reality. You will maintain litanies of focus, Morier continues, beginning to chant the canticle of clarity. Around him, The assembled Space Marines join in, their voices harmonizing into a wall of sound that drives back doubt, fear, and the whisper of dark things. You will remember your training. You will trust your brothers. And when the moment comes, when you stand in the dark with ammunition depleted and hostiles closing from all sides, you will remember that you are not merely warriors. You are the Emperor's angels of death, and death holds no terror for those who have already pledged their lives to his service. The chant builds, filling the reclusion with faith made audible, and Castiel feels something settle in his chest. Not confidence. Confidence is arrogance, and arrogance gets you killed in a space hulk. No, what he feels is acceptance. Acceptance that he might not survive the next 6 hours. Acceptance that his gene seed might join the others lost in the sin of damnation's depths. Acceptance that this is his purpose, his calling, his reason for existing. Space Marines don't survive space hulks through equipment alone. They survive through absolute certainty of purpose, through faith so complete that fear becomes irrelevant, through bonds of brotherhood so strong that you'll walk into hell itself if it means protecting the battle brother beside you. The litanies continue for 30 minutes, each one reinforcing psychological conditioning that's been built up over decades of hypno-indoctrination and combat experience. By the time Morier concludes the service, every Marine in the reclusion has entered a state of focused calm, their enhanced physiologies regulated to optimal combat readiness, their minds clear of doubt and distraction. But there's one final preparation, one last element that makes the difference between a Space Marine assault and a suicide mission. The final preparation happens in the Teleportarium, where Brother Librarian Mephiston stands surrounded by concentric circles of psychic wards, his force staff blazing with power that makes reality itself seem thin and translucent. Mephiston is a legend even among the Blood Angels, a Space Marine who fell completely to the Black Rage and somehow clawed his way back to sanity, emerging with psychic powers so formidable that he ranks among the most dangerous psychers in the Imperium. If anyone can safely navigate the psychic chaos of a space hulk teleportation, it's him. But even Mephiston looks strained. The Geller field fluctuations are within acceptable parameters, he reports, though his psychic hood crackles with energy that suggests acceptable is a relative term. I can maintain a stable translation field for 9.2 seconds. You'll have that long to deploy before warp backlash forces me to collapse the corridor. Any delay and the warp turbulence will tear you apart during materialization. 9 seconds. Castiel's squad of 10 Space Marines will have 9 seconds to teleport from the Eternal Vigilance into the depths of the Sin of Damnation, orient themselves, and prepare for immediate contact with hostiles who will absolutely be aware of their arrival. 9 seconds where they'll be vulnerable, disoriented from teleportation sickness, potentially scattered across multiple chambers if the translation field isn't perfectly stable. Teleportation is always dangerous. The technology requires punching a hole through the warp, traversing impossible distances through a dimension where physics doesn't apply, and emerging precisely at your destination. Even under ideal conditions, teleportation can result in materialization errors, emerging fused with walls, scattered across multiple locations, or simply disappearing into the warp and never reappearing at all. Teleporting into a space hulk multiplies those dangers exponentially. The hulk's time in the warp has saturated its structure with energy that interferes with navigation. Geller field fluctuations create pockets of unstable reality where teleportation becomes even more unpredictable. And the sheer size and complexity of the hulk means that targeting coordinates are approximate at best. You might aim for a specific chamber and emerge 3 decks away in a completely different section. But it's still the best option available. The alternative is using boarding torpedoes or assault craft to physically breach the hulk's exterior, then fighting through kilometers of hostile territory to reach your objectives. That approach works, but it takes time, expends ammunition and resources, and gives the enemy opportunity to establish ambushes and defensive positions. Teleportation, for all its risks, provides the element of surprise and puts you directly where you need to be, assuming you survive the materialization process. Targeting coordinates locked, Mephiston continues, his eyes glowing with psychic power as he peers through dimensions human minds weren't meant to perceive. I'm aiming for what appears to be a worship chamber in the cathedral district of the Sword of Baal. The structure seems stable, and I'm detecting minimal warp contamination in that sector. It should provide a defensible position for initial orientation. Should. That word carries a lot of weight. Castiel's squad assembles on the teleportation platforms, each Marine standing in precise position within the targeting matrix. They've done this before, survived it before, but teleportation never becomes routine. The sensation of being disassembled at the molecular level, scattered across the warp, and reassembled in a different location is fundamentally wrong in ways that even Space Marine conditioning can't entirely suppress. Equipment check. Castiel orders, and his squad performs the final verification. Bolters loaded and secured. Power armor seals tested. Vox systems verified operational. Auspex scanners calibrated. Every system that can fail has been checked one final time, because once they're inside the Hulk, there's no coming back for forgotten ammunition or malfunctioning equipment. Commencing teleportation sequence, Mephiston announces, and the air in the teleportarium begins to shimmer with energy that makes Castiel's enhanced senses scream warnings. Translation in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Traverse. Reality tears. The sensation is exactly as horrific as Castiel remembers. One moment he's standing in the teleportarium, surrounded by the familiar sounds and smells of the eternal vigilance. The next moment he's nowhere, suspended in impossible space where up and down have no meaning, where he can feel his body existing in multiple locations simultaneously, where whispers in languages he doesn't understand promise knowledge and power and damnation. Then reality reasserts itself with violence. Castiel materializes in darkness so complete that even his enhanced vision struggles to penetrate it. His armor's autosenses immediately kick in, flooding his helmet display with environmental data, threat assessments, location markers. He's standing on a solid surface, metal deck plating, centuries old, covered in a layer of organic matter he doesn't want to identify. The air is breathable but foul, carrying the scent of decay and something else, something chemical and wrong. Around him, his squad is materializing in sequence, each Marine appearing in flashes of light that briefly illuminate their surroundings. Brother Matthias, flamer ready. Brother Dante, bolter raised and scanning for targets. Brother Raphael. Brother Raphael doesn't materialize. Raphael's signal is lost, reports Brother Librarian Zacharias, the psyker attached to Castiel's squad. Translation error. He's either materialized in a different location or was lost during traverse. Castiel's jaw tightens. This is the risk of teleportation, the price paid for the speed and surprise. Raphael was supposed to be their heavy weapon specialist, the brother whose Terminator armor and assault cannon would provide devastating firepower in any major engagement. Now he's either dead, scattered across multiple dimensions, or fighting for his life in some other section of the Hulk. There's nothing they can do about it now. Form up, Castiel orders, forcing his mind away from speculation about Raphael's fate and focusing on immediate tactical necessities. Defensive perimeter. Matthias, flammers to all approaches. Dante, watch R6. Zacharias, extend your psychic senses. Tell me what we're facing. The squad responds instantly, muscle memory and training overriding the disorientation of teleportation. Within seconds, they've established a defensive position, each Marine covering a specific field of fire, overlapping their lines of sight so nothing can approach without being engaged. Castiel's autosenses are feeding him data now, painting a picture of their environment. They've materialized in what was once a chapel or worship chamber, exactly as Mephiston intended. The space is roughly 40 meters by 30, with a vaulted ceiling that rises into shadows his armor's lumen can't fully penetrate. The walls are decorated with carvings, imperial aquilas, scenes of battle and martyrdom, inscriptions in High Gothic praising the Emperor and the Primarchs. But the decorations are wrong now. Corrupted, the aquilas have been defaced, their features twisted into mockeries that hurt to look at. The battle scenes have been altered, new details carved by something with sharp implements and no regard for sacred art. The inscriptions have been overlaid with Xeno's glyphs that seem to writhe when observed directly, forming patterns that trigger recognition in parts of Castiel's brain that he didn't know existed and wishes remained dormant. This chamber has been claimed by genestealers. The Xeno's markings are territorial declarations, warnings to rivals, promises to prey. This is their hunting ground now, their breeding chamber, their kingdom carved from the corpse of imperial glory. Contact, Zacharias announces, his force staff beginning to glow with psychic power. Multiple signatures. They know we're here. They're converging on our position from at least 3 different vectors. Of course they are. The flash of teleportation energy would have been visible throughout multiple decks, and the sound of their arrival would have echoed through metal corridors for kilometers. Subtlety was never an option. The plan was always to hit hard, move fast, and complete objectives before the Genestealer swarms could organize an effective response. But plans rarely survive contact with the enemy. Movement, Brother Dante shouts, and his bolter roars to life, sending a stream of mass-reactive rounds into the shadows at the chamber's far end. The vengeance rounds detonate on impact, filling the darkness with brief flashes of light that illuminate something fast and low-slung scuttling along the wall. Genestealer. The creature is exactly as hideous as the training holograms suggested, but far more terrifying in reality. It's roughly man-sized but built like a predatory insect, with 4 arms ending in claws designed to shred armor, an elongated skull housing a brain sophisticated enough for tactical planning, and a body covered in chitin plate that can turn aside blades and absorb small arms fire. It moves with speed that defies its size, crossing the distance from wall to floor to ceiling with the casual grace of something that has no concept of gravity as a limitation. Dante's fire drives it back, the vengeance rounds blasting chunks from its exoskeleton, but it doesn't die. Genestealers are obscenely durable, their alien physiology capable of surviving wounds that would kill a human instantly. You don't kill a Genestealer by shooting it once or twice. You kill it by overwhelming its regenerative capabilities with sustained fire until its body simply can't repair the damage fast enough. Multiple contacts, all vectors. Castiel shouts, and suddenly the darkness is alive with movement. Genestealers are emerging from ventilation shafts, from gaps in the walls, from the shadows of the ceiling, their approach silent except for the click of claws on metal. They're moving with coordinated purpose, executing a tactical envelopment that would do credit to trained soldiers. Because that's exactly what they are. Genestealers aren't mindless beasts. They're intelligent, cunning, capable of sophisticated planning. They communicate through psychic bonds that allow instantaneous coordination without the delays of verbal commands. They learn from observation, adapting their tactics based on enemy responses. And they're absolutely fearless, driven by instincts that value the survival of the brood over individual preservation. Flamer now, Castiel orders, and Matthias doesn't hesitate. He triggers his weapon and sends a stream of burning promethium across the approaching swarm. The fire catches immediately, igniting the organic matter covering the deck, filling the chamber with heat and smoke and the screaming of burning Genestealers. But it's not enough. More are coming. The motion trackers are showing dozens of contacts, then scores, converging from every direction. The initial defensive position is about to be overwhelmed. Fighting withdrawal. Castiel orders, making the tactical calculation instantly. They can't hold this chamber. It's too large, with too many approaches they can't cover. They need a choke point, somewhere they can funnel the Genestealers into kill zones. Zacharias, find us a route to the Cathedral District. We need to reach the Broodlord before we're buried under sheer numbers. Corridor at bearing 095. Zacharias reports, his psychic senses cutting through the confusion of combat to identify the architecture around them. 30 meters. It's narrow enough to limit their numerical advantage. Move, Castiel orders, and his squad executes the withdrawal with perfect discipline. They don't run. Running from Genestealers is suicide. They're faster than Space Marines in a sprint. Instead, they conduct a fighting retreat, maintaining overlapping fields of fire while moving backward toward the corridor, each Marine covering the others in sequence. Brother Matthias lays down suppressing fire with his flamer, creating walls of flame that even Genestealers won't cross. Brother Dante and the others trigger controlled bursts with their bolters, conserving ammunition while ensuring maximum damage with each round. Castiel himself fires 3-round bursts, targeting Genestealers that are attempting to flank their withdrawal, bringing them down with precision fire to their sensory organs and joint structures. They're 30 seconds into the mission and have already expended 10% of their carried ammunition. The corridor Zacharias identified is exactly where he said it would be, a narrow passage barely wide enough for 2 Space Marines to advance abreast. It's perfect defensive terrain. The Genestealer's numerical advantage becomes irrelevant when they can only approach 2 or 3 at a time, and the confined space means every shot has a high probability of hitting something vital. Establish firing line. Castiel orders, and his squad takes up positions at the corridor entrance. Matthias plants himself directly in the center, his flamer aimed down the passage they've just retreated through. The others form up on either side, bolters ready, creating an overlapping field of fire that turns the corridor approach into a killing ground. The Genestealers hit the corridor entrance 3 seconds later. They come in a wave, climbing over each other in their desperation to reach prey, and Matthias opens fire. The Prometheum stream fills the corridor from wall to wall, floor to ceiling, transforming the entire approach into a furnace. Genestealers scream, an awful alien sound that's too intelligent to be animal but too inhuman to be ignored, and the ones in the front try to retreat, only to be driven forward by the press of bodies behind them. It's slaughter. Controlled, efficient, absolutely necessary slaughter. But Castiel can see the fuel gauge on Matthias's flamer dropping with terrifying speed. 2% consumed. 4%. 8%. They've been in combat for less than 2 minutes and they're already burning through resources that were supposed to last hours. Conserve fuel, Castiel orders. Burst fire only. We need to make every tank last. Matthias adjusts his fire pattern immediately, switching from continuous stream to controlled bursts that still deny the Genestealers' approach but use Prometheum more efficiently. The change creates gaps in the fire coverage, moments when Genestealers can advance through the flames, but those moments are exactly when the squad's bolters open fire. The coordinated fire discipline is beautiful in its lethality. Matthias creates a barrier of flame. When he stops to conserve fuel, the bolters take over, shredding any Genestealer that attempts to exploit the gap. Then Matthias fires again, forcing the Xenos back, and the cycle repeats. It's sustainable. For now. Castiel. Zacharias's voice carries a warning tone. I'm detecting psychic resonance from deeper in the Hulk. The Broodlord knows we're here. It's directing the swarms, coordinating their response. These attacks are just harassment, testing our capabilities. The real assault will come when they've assessed our weaknesses. Of course, Genestealers don't just swarm mindlessly. They probe, analyze, adapt. Every attack they launch is gathering intelligence about Space Marine tactics, weapons capabilities, ammunition reserves. The Broodlord, the Genestealer patriarch that commands the entire infestation through psychic bonds, is studying them through the eyes of its lesser kin, learning how they fight so it can devise counter-tactics. Which means every moment they spend in static defense is a moment the Genestealers are preparing a more effective assault. We need to move, Castiel decides. We can't let them dictate the tempo. Zacharias, how far to the Cathedral District? Approximately 800 meters, the librarian reports, consulting his psychic senses rather than the hololithic map data. The maps can't be trusted in a space hulk. Corridors that should exist according to the plans might be sealed. Passages that shouldn't exist might have been opened by structural damage, and the entire layout might have changed during the Hulk's time in the warp. But the route is circuitous. We'll need to traverse at least 3 distinct sections of the Hulk, each with different atmospheric and gravitational conditions. 3 sections. 3 environmental transitions where they'll be vulnerable, where the Genestealers will attempt to exploit the moment of adaptation. 3 opportunities for ambush, for disaster, for death. Then we'd better start moving, Castiel says. Squad, prepare for advance. Matthias, 1 final suppressing burst, then we move fast. Standard advance formation, 5-meter intervals. Zacharias, point position. Use your psychic senses to identify threats before we walk into them. The squad acknowledges, and Matthias triggers his flamer 1 final time, filling the corridor behind them with flames that will buy precious seconds of respite. Then they're moving, advancing through passages that haven't seen human footsteps in centuries, through darkness illuminated only by their armor's lumens, through air that tastes of death and promises worse. The first section of the advance is almost peaceful, which Castile knows means they're walking into something terrible. The corridor is structurally intact, its walls bearing the marks of the Imperial vessel it once belonged to, the Sword of Baal, according to the identification markers still visible on bulkheads. The deck plating is solid beneath their boots. The atmosphere is breathable, maintained by life support systems that have continued functioning long after everyone aboard this vessel died. Emergency lighting strips provide faint illumination, their luminosity flickering but functional. It's wrong. Everything about it is wrong. Why is the life support still active? Brother Dante asks the question they're all thinking. This ship was lost during the Horus Heresy. That's 10,000 years. Power systems don't last that long without maintenance. Unless something is maintaining them, Zacharias says quietly. I'm detecting energy signatures ahead. Something's powering these systems. Something that shouldn't be possible. They advance another 50 meters, and the corridor opens into what was once a crew habitation section. Quarters line both sides of the passage, their doors either sealed or hanging open on broken hinges. Through the open doorways, Castile can see the remnants of lives interrupted, personal effects scattered on the floor, furniture overturned, walls marked with what might be blast scoring or claw marks. And in one of the quarters, sitting at a desk as if he'd simply paused in the middle of writing, is a space marine. The figure is perfectly preserved, his armor intact, his posture relaxed. He's holding a stylus, positioned over a data slate that still shows text. His helmet is maglocked to his belt, and his face is that of a blood angel from 10,000 years ago. Emperor's mercy, Brother Dante whispers. Is he? Stasis field, Zacharias confirms, extending his psychic senses. Local, very small scale, is keeping him preserved exactly as he was at the moment of activation. But I don't sense any consciousness. He's not alive. He's just paused. Castile approaches slowly, his instincts screaming warnings, but his duty demanding investigation. This is a lost brother, a blood angel who fought during the heresy, who might have walked beside Sanguinius himself. The gene seed alone would be invaluable, 10,000-year-old genetic material, potentially uncorrupted by the mutations that have crept into the chapter stock over millennia. But as Castile gets closer, he sees something that stops him cold. The data slate in the Marine's hands is still displaying text. And the text is updating in real time, new words appearing as if being written by invisible hands. Help US. We are still here. Trapped between moments. The warp holds US. Help US please. Fall back. Castile orders immediately, his voice hard. That's not a preservation field. That's a warp trap. Anyone who tries to interact with it will be pulled into whatever temporal nightmare is holding him. As if his words triggered a response, the figure at the desk suddenly moves. Not naturally. Not with the smooth motion of someone coming out of stasis. Instead, the Marine's head rotates with jerky, stop-motion movements, turning to face Castile with eyes that are simultaneously dead and far too aware. The mouth opens. Words emerge in a voice that sounds like it's being played backward and forward simultaneously. Brother. Help. Trapped. Can't. Die. Won't. Time. Broken. Warp. Forever. Help. Please. Kill. Me. Save. All. Then the figure freezes again, locked in its new position, staring at Castile with an expression of such absolute anguish that even through space marine conditioning, he feels his heart's clench in sympathy. Move, Castile orders, tearing his gaze away from the trapped marine. There's nothing they can do, no way to help. Attempting to interfere with warp-based temporal distortions is beyond their capabilities, beyond anyone's capabilities except perhaps the most powerful psychers in the Imperium. The trapped marine has been suffering for 10,000 years, and he'll continue suffering for 10,000 more unless the Hulk is destroyed completely. This is what space Hulks do. They don't just kill. They trap. They torture. They preserve suffering across millennia, turning death into an infinite moment of agony. Contacts, Brother Matthias shouts, and Castile's attention snaps back to immediate threats. His motion tracker is lighting up with targets, dozens of them, emerging from the crew quarters all around them. The Genestealers have been using the habitation section as a staging ground, hiding in rooms, waiting for the perfect moment to spring their ambush. And the Space Marines have walked right into it. Defensive circle, Castiel orders, and his squad responds instantly, forming a tight perimeter where each Marine covers a specific arc of fire. The Genestealers are coming from all directions, from doorways, from ceiling vents, from gaps in the deck plating where they've been lurking in the spaces between bulkheads. The corridor erupts in violence. Bolter fire hammers through the confined space, each shot precisely aimed at vital targets. Genestealers scream and die, their bodies blown apart by mass-reactive rounds that detonate inside their thoraxes. Matthias sweeps his flamer in controlled arcs, denying approach vectors and forcing the Xenos to bunch up into kill zones. But there are too many. For every Genestealer they kill, 2 more appear. They're dropping from ceiling vents, emerging from rooms the Space Marines have already passed, coordinating their assault with precision that speaks to intelligence guiding their actions. "We're being flanked," Brother Dante calls out, and Castiel sees it immediately. A group of Genestealers has circled behind them, cutting off their retreat, turning their defensive position into a kill box. This is the nightmare scenario, surrounded in close quarters with limited ammunition, facing an enemy that keeps coming no matter how many you kill. Space Marine armor and combat prowess provide an edge, but edges can be overwhelmed. Numbers matter. Sustainability matters. And right now, the Genestealers have infinite numbers while the Space Marines have finite ammunition. Castiel makes a tactical calculation in milliseconds. "Breaching charge," he orders. "Blast through the deck plating. We're going down." Brother Matthias understands immediately. He pulls a melt-a-bomb from his equipment harness, arms it with a quick authentication code, and throws it at the deck beneath their feet. The squad has 3 seconds to brace. The melt-a-bomb detonates with focused thermal energy that liquefies metal, boring through deck plating, support structures, and into the chamber below. The deck collapses, and Castiel's squad drops through the breach, falling 3 meters into darkness. They land in a cargo hold, their armor absorbing the impact, and immediately establish a new defensive perimeter. Above them, through the breach, they can hear Genestealers screaming in frustration, denied their prey by the sudden vertical displacement. "Status check," Castiel orders, his heart still hammering from the adrenaline of close combat. "Ammunition at 70%, Brother Dante reports. "Flamer fuel at 63%, Matthias adds. "Minor armor damage, all systems functional." The others confirm in sequence. They've survived the ambush, but at cost. They're deeper in the Hulk than planned, in an unknown section with no clear route to their objectives. And above them, the Genestealers are already adapting, finding ways to follow. "Zacharias," Castiel addresses the librarian. "Where are we?" The Psyker extends his senses, his force staff glowing as he peers through dimensions of reality that Castiel can't perceive. "We're in the lower cargo sections of the Sword of Baal. The Cathedral District should be that direction, roughly 200 meters. But there's something else. I'm detecting a powerful psychic presence. It's not the Broodlord. It's something different. Something ancient. Of course there is. Because space hulks never contain just one threat. They're collections of nightmares, each more horrific than the last, all competing for territory in the twisted metal corpse. "Can we avoid it?" Castiel asks. "No," Zacharias says simply. "It's between us and our objective. We'll have to go through it." Castiel nods, accepting the inevitability. This is space Hulk warfare. Every objective requires going through hell to reach it. Every mission becomes a series of calculated risks, each one potentially catastrophic, all of them necessary. Then we move fast and we move quiet, Castiel decides. Minimal engagement. We're not here to clear the entire Hulk. We're here to kill the Broodlord and plant charges. Everything else is secondary to those objectives. His squad nods understanding, and they begin moving through the cargo hold, advancing between storage containers that are still sealed after 10,000 years. Some of the containers are marked with hazmat symbols. Others bear the seals of the Mechanicus. One particularly large container is etched with wards that make Zacharias visibly uncomfortable. That's holding something dangerous, the librarian warns. I recommend we give it a wide berth. They're 10 meters past the warded container when it explodes. The explosion isn't fire or concussion. It's pure warp energy, reality tearing open like infected flesh. And from the breach emerges something that Castiel's mind refuses to fully process. It was human once, or something human adjacent. Now it's a twisted amalgamation of flesh and metal, organic tissue fused with machinery in configurations that defy both biology and engineering. Multiple faces emerge from its surface, their expressions frozen in eternal screams. Limbs protrude at impossible angles, some ending in hands, others in blades, still others in weapons that look like they grew rather than were attached. And it's aware, conscious, looking at them with intelligence that's been driven mad by millennia of suffering but hasn't quite died. Kill me. It screams in a voice that comes from multiple throats simultaneously. Emperor, please kill me. I've been awake for 10,000 years. Kill me, please, please, please. Fire! Castiel orders, and his squad opens up with everything they have. Bolter rounds punch through corrupted flesh. Flamer fire ignites organic tissue. But the thing doesn't die. It can't die. Whatever warp corruption is sustaining it has made death an impossibility, trapping consciousness in a body that should have ceased functioning millennia ago. The abomination charges, moving with speed that something its size shouldn't possess, its blade limbs extended and aimed directly at Brother Dante. The young space marine fires desperately, his bolter rounds tearing chunks from the thing's mass, but it's not enough to stop momentum. Castiel moves without thinking, putting himself between the creature and his brother. His combat knife comes up in a defensive parry that he knows is inadequate. The blade limb is massive, driven by strength born of warp-fueled madness, and it's going to punch through his armor and kill him. But then Zacharias is there, his force staff blazing with psychic power, interposing a shield of mental energy between the abomination and Castiel. The blade limb strikes the shield and rebounds, the warp energies conflicting, canceling each other out in a flash of light that leaves afterimages on Castiel's retinas even through his helmet's auto-dimming. It's a failed chaos mutation experiment. Zacharias shouts, struggling to maintain the psychic shield. Probably from the heresy era. Someone tried to create enhanced warriors and got this instead. Its psychic resonance is massive. It's in agony and has been for 10,000 years. We need to end its suffering. How? Matthias demands. It's not dying. Decapitate it. Zacharias responds. Sever the connection between brain structures. Physical death won't work, but neurological separation might. Castiel processes the information and formulates a plan in seconds. Matthias, hit it with sustained flamer fire. Pin it in place. Dante, concentrated bolter fire on the neck structure. Everyone else, suppressing fire on the limbs. We're going to cut this thing's head off. The plan is executed with space marine precision. Matthias triggers his flamer, hitting the abomination with a continuous stream of promethium that drives it backward. The creature screams, those awful, multi-throated screams, but the fire forces it against a bulkhead where it can't maneuver. Brother Dante switches to single-shot mode, aiming carefully despite the chaos, placing each bolter round into the same section of the creature's neck structure. The mass-reactive rounds detonate inside corrupted tissue, blasting away flesh and metal, exposing the spine equivalent that's holding the headmass to the body. One more, Castiel shouts, and Dante fires his final round directly into the exposed spine. The structure severs. The headmass falls, hitting the deck with a wet sound, and the body collapses. For a moment, nothing happens. Then the warp energy sustaining the abomination dissipates like mist, and the flesh begins to decay rapidly, 10,000 years of entropy compressed into seconds. Within moments, all that remains is a pile of corrupted matter and a skull that's been warped into an expression of eternal agony. Emperor's mercy. Brother Dante breathes, staring at the remains. It was awake the whole time, conscious, for 10,000 years. This is what chaos does. Chaplain Moriar's voice comes through the vox. transmitted from the Eternal Vigilance where he's monitoring their mission. It doesn't just kill, perverts. It takes the Emperor's finest warriors and transforms them into monuments to suffering. Remember this, brothers. Remember why we fight. Death is a mercy compared to what awaits those who fall to chaos corruption. Castile tears his gaze away from the remains and forces his mind back to the mission. They've expended more ammunition killing that one abomination than they used fighting through the Genestealer ambush. Resources are depleting faster than planned. And they're not even halfway to their objectives. Ammunition status, Castile orders. The reports come back, each one worse than he'd hoped. Brother Dante is down to 40%. Matthias's flamer is at 53%. The others are varying between 50 and 60%. They're burning through resources too fast, and they haven't even reached the Broodlord yet. We need to conserve, Castile decides. From this point forward, we engage only when necessary. Stealth takes priority over aggression. Zacharias, can you mask our psychic signatures? Partially, the librarian responds. The Genestealers communicate through psychic bonds, but I can create interference that makes us appear less distinct. It won't hide us completely, but it might buy us time. Do it, Castile orders. Everyone switch to combat knives for close work. Reserve ammunition for situations where stealth has already failed. We're going dark. The squad acknowledges, and they begin moving through the cargo hold with renewed focus on stealth. Their power armor is heavy, each step potentially audible through the Hulk's metal structure, but Space Marines are trained in silent movement. They learn to distribute weight precisely, to time their steps to the ambient sounds of the Hulk, to move like shadows despite wearing half a ton of ceramite. The cargo hold extends for over 100 meters, filled with containers that have remained sealed across millennia. Some of them are marked with hazard symbols that indicate radioactive, biological, or mimetic contamination. Others bear no markings at all, which is somehow more disturbing. What cargo requires no identification, no warnings, no indication of contents? Castile doesn't investigate. Time is limited, objectives are clear, and curiosity has killed more Space Marines in Space Hulks than most threats. They move through the hold, maintaining strict fire discipline, their attention focused on motion trackers and Zacharias' psychic early warning. They're 50 meters from the hold's far exit when Zacharias stops suddenly, his force staff blazing with power. Contact, he whispers through the Vox. Not Genestealers. Something else. Humanoid. Multiple signatures. They're not hostile yet, but they're aware of our presence. Position, Castile asks. Ahead of us, blocking the exit. 6 individuals armed with weapons that register as both technological and organic. I can't get a clear psychic reading, they're shielded somehow. Castile makes a decision. We advance cautiously, weapons ready but not aimed. If they're human survivors, we extract them. If they're hostiles, we eliminate them quickly and move on. The squad advances, and as they approach the exit, figures emerge from the shadows. They were human once. Castile can see that in their basic structure, the bipedal configuration, the proportions that mark them as descended from human stock. But they're not human anymore. Their flesh has been altered, enhanced with chitinous plating that resembles Genestealer exoskeletons. Their hands have been replaced with hybrid structures, part hand and part claw. Their faces retain human features but with alien modifications, enlarged eyes that can see in darkness, nictitating membranes that blink with disturbing rapidity, jawlines that suggest they can dislocate to accommodate feeding structures. Genestealer hybrids, the offspring of humans infected by Genestealer genetic material, the first generation in a breeding cycle that would eventually produce pure-strain Genestealers. They're living weapons, combining human intelligence with Xeno's physical capabilities, and they're absolutely loyal to the Broodlord that commands them through psychic bonds. Hold, Castile orders, noting that the hybrids are armed but not attacking. Zacharias, can you communicate with them? I can try, the librarian says, extending his psychic senses carefully. But understand that they're part of the Genestealer hive mind. Anything we say to them is being heard by the Broodlord. Then let's send a message, Castile decides. He steps forward, making himself the focus of attention, and speaks with his helmet vox at full amplification. I am Brother Sergeant Castile of the Blood Angels. We come in the name of the Emperor and by his authority. Stand aside or be destroyed. The hybrids remain motionless for a long moment. Then one of them, the largest, bearing marks that suggest leadership, speaks in Gothic that's heavily accented but understandable. You are not welcome here. The Patriarch claims this hulk. Leave now or be consumed. We're not here to negotiate, Castile responds. Your Patriarch has brought this hulk into Imperial space. That makes it a threat to the Imperium. We're here to eliminate that threat. Stand aside. Then you will die, the hybrid leader says simply. The Patriarch has been waiting. It knew you would come. It has prepared. Your squad is surrounded. Your extraction is impossible. This hulk will be your tomb. Before Castile can respond, his motion tracker erupts with contacts. Dozens, hundreds, coming from every direction, converging on their position with coordinated purpose. The Genestealers have been hurting them. Every engagement, every ambush, every decision they've made has been anticipated, controlled, guided. They've been walking exactly where the Broodlord wanted them to go, into a kill zone where overwhelming numbers can be brought to bear. Defensive positions. Castile orders, and his squad responds instantly, forming a tight perimeter with overlapping fields of fire. The hybrid leader and its companions fade back into the shadows, disappearing with speed that confirms they're not planning to participate directly in the coming slaughter. And then the Genestealers hit them. They come in a wave, a living tide of alien flesh and chitin, and there's no subtlety anymore, no tactical precision. This is brute force, overwhelming numbers, the Genestealer equivalent of an all-out assault. They're climbing over each other, using their own dead as stepping stones, accepting casualties that would break any other species because the Broodlord has calculated that even with losses, enough will get through to tear the Space Marines apart. Castile's bolter roars, firing in controlled bursts that drop Genestealers with every 3-round sequence. Around him, his brothers are doing the same, their decades of training evident in their fire discipline, their target selection, their conservation of ammunition even in the face of overwhelming assault. Matthias's flamer sweeps left and right, creating walls of fire that channel the Genestealers into specific approach vectors where bolter fire can be most effective. It's textbook combined arms tactics, exactly as the Codex Astartes prescribes, and it's working. But it's not enough. Ammunition at 20%. Brother Dante shouts. Flamer fuel at 30%. Matthias adds. They've been fighting for 90 seconds and they're already running critically low on resources. At this rate, they'll be out of ammunition within 5 minutes. And the Genestealers keep coming, their numbers seemingly infinite, their assault relentless. We need extraction, Castile shouts into the Vox, broadcasting to the Eternal Vigilance. Immediate teleport retrieval. Brother Librarian Mephiston's voice comes back, strained with effort. Negative. Warp interference is too strong. The Broodlord is generating psychic static that's disrupting translation coordinates. I can't get a lock. Of course, the Broodlord isn't just coordinating the assault. It's actively preventing their escape, using its psychic power to create interference that makes teleportation impossible. They're trapped, surrounded, running out of ammunition, with no support and no way out. This is how Space Marines die in Space Hulks. Not in glorious combat against worthy opponents, but drowning in numbers, their ammunition exhausted, their position overwhelmed, their gene seed lost forever in the darkness. Then we do this the hard way, Castile decides, his voice absolutely calm despite the situation. Breakthrough assault. We punch through their lines and make for the Cathedral District. If we can kill the Broodlord, the psychic interference will collapse and extraction becomes possible. It's that or we all die here. That's suicide, Brother Dante protests. We'd have to fight through hundreds of Genestealers. Yes, Castile agrees. But suicide is certain if we stay here. At least if we're advancing, we have a chance of reaching our objective before we're overwhelmed. And if we die doing our duty rather than cowering in a defensive position. There's a moment of silence, And then Brother Matthias laughs. It's not a sound of humor but of acceptance, of a warrior who's been backed into a corner and has decided that if death is coming, he'll meet it on his feet and charging forward. For Sanguinius and the Emperor, Matthias says, let's show these Xenos bastards how blood angels die. The others echo the sentiment, and Castiel feels pride surge through him despite the desperate situation. This is why the blood angels are legends. Not because they're invincible, but because they refuse to accept defeat even when defeat is inevitable. Breach formation, Castiel orders. Matthias, your point. Burn us a path. The rest of us, concentrated fire on whatever comes through the flames. Zacharias, you're our rear guard. Use your force staff to hold them off while we advance. We move fast, we move hard, and we don't stop for anything. Understood. Understood. Then let's go kill ourselves a broodlord. Matthias triggers his flamer, sending a sustained burst directly ahead, and the Genestealers in that path die screaming. The squad charges forward into the flames, through the burning bodies, into the mass of Xenos flesh beyond. It's the most insane thing Castiel has done in 3 decades of service. They're running through a living nightmare, surrounded on all sides by enemies, their armor scoring hits from Genestealer claws that are trying to find gaps in the ceramite, their weapons firing non-stop as they try to clear a path. The din is overwhelming. Bolter fire, Genestealer screams, the roar of flammers, the crackling of Zacharias's force staff as he uses psychic power to physically shove Genestealers away from their rear. Brother Dante goes down, a Genestealer managing to get under his guard and drive its claws through a joint in his armor. He's up again in seconds, combat knife in hand, stabbing the Xenos repeatedly until it releases him, but his armor is compromised and blood is running freely down his leg. Keep moving, Castiel orders, grabbing Dante and half-dragging him forward. They can't stop. Stopping means death. They have to keep advancing, keep killing, keep moving until they reach the Cathedral District or until the Genestealers drag them down. Matthias's flamer runs dry. The fuel gauge hits 0 and the Promethium stream cuts off abruptly, leaving them without their primary crowd control weapon. Matthias doesn't hesitate. He drops the useless flamer, draws his bolt pistol, and keeps firing, switching to single shots to conserve the limited ammunition in his pistol's magazine. They're 40 meters from the cargo hold exit when Castiel's motion tracker shows something different. A larger contact, moving with purpose, pushing through the Genestealer swarm like they're not even there. The Broodlord has come to kill them personally. It emerges from the mass of lesser Genestealers, and Castiel understands immediately why these creatures terrify even veteran space marines. The Broodlord is massive, easily twice the size of a standard Genestealer, its body covered in chitin plating that looks like it could turn aside bolter fire. For arms end in claws that are less weapons and more surgical instruments designed specifically for dismembering power armor. Its skull is elongated, housing a brain sophisticated enough for strategic planning and psychic power that radiates from it like heat from a furnace. And it's looking directly at Castiel with intelligence that's absolutely terrifyingly human in its malevolence. Target priority, Castiel shouts. All fire on the Broodlord. Now! The squad's remaining ammunition is concentrated on the Broodlord, bolter rounds hammering into its chitin plating, and Castiel sees impacts, sees damage, but the creature doesn't stop. It's advancing through the fire, accepting wounds that would kill lesser beings, driven by will and hatred that overrides physical damage. Zacharias steps forward, his force staff blazing with psychic power, and releases a blast of mental energy directly at the Broodlord. The psychic attack hits like a physical blow, staggering the creature, and for a moment Castiel thinks they might actually bring it down. Then the Broodlord's own psychic power surges in response, and Zacharias screams. The librarian is lifted off his feet by invisible force, his armor crumpling as psychic pressure is applied from all directions simultaneously. Blood runs from his helmet's Vox grills as internal injuries manifest, and Castiel knows his brother is dying. No! Castiel roars, and he does something that goes against every tactical doctrine, every survival instinct. He charges directly at the Broodlord, closing to melee range where a Space Marine's advantages of armor and training might count for something against the creature's overwhelming physical power. His combat knife comes up, the monomolecular edge sharp enough to cut through Genestealer chitin, and he drives it directly into the Broodlord's eye. The creature screams, a psychic scream that resonates through Castiel's mind, bypassing his helmet's audio filters entirely, and its concentration on Zacharias breaks. The librarian falls, hitting the deck hard, but he's alive and that's all that matters. The Broodlord's claw comes around in a backhanded swipe that Castiel barely dodges, the razored edge scoring across his chest plate and leaving deep gouges in ceramite that was supposed to be impenetrable. He rolls, comes up with his bolter, and fires at point-blank range directly into the wound his knife created. The mass-reactive round enters through the damaged eye socket and detonates inside the Broodlord's skull. The creature staggers, its psychic scream cutting off abruptly, and collapses. For a moment, nothing happens. Then the entire Genestealer swarm freezes, their coordinated assault suddenly disrupted as the psychic bonds controlling them are severed by their patriarch's death. Move! Castiel orders, not wasting the opportunity. Extraction window is open. Zacharias, can you walk? The librarian struggles to his feet, his armor sparking from internal damage, blood still running from his Vox grills. I can manage, but we need to leave now. The swarm will recover from the psychic shock within minutes. They run, leaving the cargo hold, entering corridors that lead deeper into the Hulk's cathedral district. Behind them, they can hear the Genestealers beginning to move again, their coordination returning as secondary leaders establish new psychic bonds. But the window of confusion has given the Space Marines precious time. They're not out yet. They still have to plant the melted charges, confirm the Broodlord's death, and reach an extraction point. But for the first time since they teleported into this nightmare, Castiel allows himself to think they might actually survive. The cathedral district of the Sword of Baal is a monument to faith corrupted. What was once a sacred space, dedicated to the worship of the God Emperor and the veneration of Sanguinius, has been transformed into a Genestealer nest. The statues of saints have been defaced, their features altered to resemble Xeno's abominations. The stained glass windows depicting scenes from Imperial history have been shattered, replaced with organic membranes that pulse with bioluminescence. The pews where the faithful once prayed have been arranged into structures that look disturbingly like feeding stations. And everywhere, covering every surface, are eggs. Genestealer eggs, thousands of them, pulsing with life, each one containing a larval form waiting to emerge and continue the cycle of infestation. This is what the Genestealers were protecting, what the Broodlord died defending, the next generation, the future of their species, the means by which they would spread throughout the Imperium if left unchecked. Plant the charges. Castiel orders, his voice hoarse from hours of combat. His armor is scarred, his ammunition is down to a single magazine, and his body is screaming warnings about stress fractures and internal bleeding that his enhanced physiology can't quite repair fast enough. But he's alive. His squad is alive, and they have a job to finish. Brother Matthias, moving on willpower alone despite wounds that would have incapacitated a normal human, begins placing melted charges throughout the cathedral. Each charge is positioned carefully, designed to create a cascading thermal reaction that will incinerate every egg, every larva, every trace of Genestealer genetic material in this entire section. It takes 15 minutes to complete the placement. 15 minutes where Castiel stands guard, his remaining bolter ammunition ready, waiting for the Genestealers to mount one final assault. But they don't come. The swarm is leaderless, confused, retreating to whatever instincts guide them in the absence of psychic coordination. Charge is set, Matthias reports. 5-minute timer. That should give us enough time to reach minimum safe distance. Acknowledged, Castiel says. Zacharias, can you contact the ship? We need extraction coordinates. The librarian, leaning heavily on his force staff, extends his psychic senses one final time. I can get a signal through now that the Broodlord is dead. The Eternal Vigilance is standing by. Mephiston says he can lock onto our position and extract us, but we need to be in an open area. The teleportation corridor won't penetrate multiple decks of hull plating. Then we find an open area. Castiel decides. 5 minutes to detonation. That's enough time if we move now. Squad, on me. They leave the cathedral, moving through corridors that feel different now. Quieter. Less hostile. The Genestealers are still present. Castiel's motion tracker shows contacts in the distance, but they're not attacking. They're retreating, abandoning the Hulk, recognizing on some instinctive level that this place is about to become uninhabitable. The squad reaches a cargo bay large enough for teleportation extraction with 90 seconds to spare. Castiel activates his Vox, broadcasting to the Eternal Vigilance. This is Brother Sergeant Castiel. We are ready for extraction. Authorization Sanguinius 77 Alpha. Mephiston's voice comes back immediately. Acknowledged. Translation coordinates locked. Initiating teleportation in 5 seconds. Brace for transit. 4, 3, 2, 1. Traverse. Reality tears for the second time, and Castiel experiences the same horrific sensation of being disassembled at the molecular level. But this time he welcomes it. Anything is better than staying in the sin of damnation for even one more second. They materialize in the teleportarium of the Eternal Vigilance, and Castiel has never been so grateful to feel solid deck plating beneath his boots, to breathe recycled air that doesn't taste of death, to see the familiar architecture of an Imperial vessel rather than the twisted corruption of a space Hulk. Mission accomplished, he reports to Chapter Master Dante, who's waiting in the teleportarium with Medicae teams, ready to treat their injuries. Broodlord confirmed eliminated. Melta charges placed and detonated. Genestealer infestation destroyed. 1 casualty, Brother Raphael, lost during initial teleportation. Gene seed unrecoverable. You did well, Brother Sergeant, Dante says, and there's genuine respect in his ancient voice. The sin of damnation has been neutralized. The crypta system is secure. And you brought your brothers home. Castiel nods, but he can't feel pride. Not yet. Right now, all he feels is exhaustion. The bone-deep weariness that comes from 6 hours of continuous combat, from making life-or-death decisions every second, from surviving when survival seemed impossible. The Medicae teams move in, helping the injured squad members toward the apothecarian. Brother Dante is carried on a stretcher, his leg wound requiring immediate surgery. Zacharias walks under his own power but barely, his psychic reserves completely depleted. Matthias moves like someone who's forgotten what it feels like not to be in pain. They're all damaged. Physically, psychologically, spiritually. Space Hulk deployments leave scars that last decades, that never quite heal, that remind you every day that you've walked through hell and somehow came out the other side. But they survived. That's what Space Marines do in Space Hulks. They prepare with obsessive thoroughness. They fight with discipline born of centuries of tradition. They adapt to environments that defy every tactical doctrine. They make impossible decisions and live with the consequences. They lose brothers to dangers that can't be predicted or prevented. And somehow, through skill and faith and sheer stubborn refusal to die, they complete their objectives and make it back. Not all of them, never all of them, but enough. Enough to say that the mission was successful. Enough to justify the cost in blood and gene seed and psychological trauma. Enough to ensure that when the next Space Hulk appears, when the next nightmare emerges from the warp and threatens the Imperium, there will be Space Marines willing to go into the dark one more time. Because that's what survival in a Space Hulk really means. Not just getting out alive, but being willing to go back in when duty demands it. Castiel watches through the Eternal Vigilance's viewports as the sin of damnation begins to break apart. The Melta charges triggering cascade reactions that tear through the ancient structure. In a matter of hours, the Hulk will be debris, its threats neutralized, its horrors ended, until the next one appears. And when it does, Brother Sergeant Castiel and warriors like him will board it again. They'll face the Genestealers, the warp corruption, the impossible geometry and environmental hazards. They'll lose brothers. They'll survive when survival seems impossible. Because that's how Space Marines really survive a Space Hulk. Not through invincibility, through preparation, discipline, faith, and the absolute refusal to accept defeat even when the entire galaxy seems determined to kill you. through brotherhood that transcends individual survival, through duty that matters more than life itself. That's the truth of space Hulk warfare in Warhammer 40K. And that truth is written in the blood of every space marine who's ever entered the dark and somehow found their way back to the light.